Hello, everybody. I'm here with Shawn Murphy. He's the Executive Director of Organizational Development and Workplace Trends at Bleuscape. This is it's a whole mouthful. And I'm glad to have him for this short chat. And we're going to talk about culture and, what you can do yourself. That's the main takeaway I got from your talk before. And what you can do yourself to, create the environment that you want to create, that's useful to work in. So first of all, about that title, can you explain what it is you do?
Yes. So think of it as in two categories. So Bleuscape, part of what I'm coming on board to help them with is apply human-centered design practices to the product and the user experience, right? So basically, when you use technology, you want it to be kind of a natural interaction with it, right? I mean, you guys know this at N2O.
We've been told this.
Yes. Unfortunately, not all technology is intuitive or kind of aligns itself with human needs. So
business technology, right?
Yeah. So that's part of my job, is to take the human-centered design practices and help the product and user experience teams by taking the field work and bringing it to them. The other part is just the thought leadership. So how do we help people collaborate better, right? Technology isn't the only answer, but how we interact with each other, the questions that we have, how we deal with conflict, those are also part of my charge, is to help raise that awareness for our clients and also anybody who's interested in just working better in the 21st century.
And how do you teach a manager? Because you can tell me that I have a huge influence on my team, and I bet you it is like that because you're the manager. So by definition, you have a huge influence. But how do you teach them right and wrong?
It's a good question. In fact, one of your attendees asked me that question, and the truth of the matter is...
Okay, that makes sense. And so you had a talk before at this event, and I really liked your take on culture. Can you tell us a bit about your background and what you did in terms of culture change and what you learned? I know this is a hard question because there's a lot to learn about culture change, obviously, sure. But I'd like to know.
So the bulk of my career has been in organizational change management, mergers and acquisitions, and that's when I learned about how horrible most organizations are around.
That's a bold statement.
When think about mergers and acquisitions, it's like one company is going away, right? And the way that we've traditionally dealt with that is, well, your culture is the out culture, ours is the new culture. Suck it up, buttercup. This is what you get, and that. While I get it, it's just not a way to effectively transition companies. So it doesn't matter if it's a merger and acquisition, or just you're realizing things have to change within the company. Culture change is really hard, right? It's a long haul. It's expensive. So one of the opposite, or maybe its sister, we'll say, to culture is climate, and climate is what it feels like to work somewhere. And managers have more influence on that than they do the culture. And so they can affect change more locally, we'll say. So what I call pockets of excellence. So your team that you lead, you have the greatest influence on their experience, and you help shape that climate. You may not be able to change the culture by yourself, but you can certainly change how employees experience their work on a day-to-day basis. And that's, I think, the idea is to focus there and then let that kind of propagate out.
The oil stain principle, so to say. And how do you teach a manager? Because you can tell me that I have a huge influence on my team, and I bet you it is like that because you're the manager. So by definition, you have a huge influence. But how do you teach them right and wrong?
It's a good question. In fact, one of your attendees asked me that question, and the truth of the matter is, these aren't simple concepts that you can just send somebody to a class and say, you now have the understanding of the nuances that it takes to help people be successful.
This is the list of do's, this is the list of don'ts.
That's right. If only we came with a manual, right?
Yeah.
Do this and this and this is what Shawn will do. It doesn't quite work that way. So I think what we and this is a little bit of kind of future kind of prognostication, is we've got to start younger in helping employees and future employees understand how to have healthy interactions with people.
Yeah.
So that by the time they get to the workplace, they've had more than just ask open-ended questions or this is what marketing does, but it's more around how do you interact with people in a way that you are building good relationships.
Yeah, and I totally see your points, but the thing is, I feel like a lot of young people right now, they tend to search for more feedback, and they tend to look for that environment where they're supported and things are done differently, so to say. But the issue is there is just a lot of managers out there that then punish, quote unquote, that behavior of those new employees, and they're like, nah, that's not how we do things around here. Let's not exaggerate with the feedback. Just do your work and shut up. So if you have a team of managers or just one manager sitting in front of you, what can we do to teach them or to help them? Because teach them is maybe putting it the wrong way. Because as you said, there's no list of do's and don'ts. But in your experience, is there anything we can do to convince them, help?
Yeah. Well, what we do know is that the brain is always learning. So by that, we know that if I'm a manager who may be kind of more traditional and, let me bark at you what you need to do, if I'm truly if I understand the benefit to changing my behavior, and that's a big if, right? Yep. Companies can do that by making things really uncomfortable for their managers, whether it be withholding bonuses or not letting them have the opportunities that they need because they're not developing in the way that they need to. I mean, those are kind of, I don't know if they're extreme, but they're certainly those are difficult. But I think companies really need to start investing regularly in the development of these soft skills. How do you coach people? How do you ask people to step up their performance in a way that isn't sounding like you're putting them down, saying that they're not any good, right? But how do you have honest conversations? And I think those kind of workshops or those classes, they're not just so I'm going to go and I'm done. It's an ongoing.
Yeah, exactly. That's what happened to me a couple of weeks ago. Is I had a discussion with an HR person, and she said, "Look, I can't understand why people aren't using our quarterly objectives that we've invented because we've explained them 1 year ago exactly how they worked, and she couldn't understand that explaining it once was not going to." So
amongst all the other things that they're hearing, right? That the employees are.
Managers very busy.
Yeah.
We talked about that.
We did.
Before. It's about priorities. And so do you have maybe an example of I wouldn't say a transition you did, but a manager or a team of managers you helped move on to giving more feedback, to creating a culture where employee experience is at the top of the priorities? Yeah.
So I think if there's one kind of golden rule.
Yeah, the silver bullet. That's what we're looking for.
Well, I don't know that I'd call silver bullet because it will make some people uncomfortable.
Yeah, okay.
So if you really want to change something, change the way the organization, the culture is, or maybe the way services are delivered, the best way is to not put let me say it differently. Don't put a bunch of managers in the room, come up with this brilliant idea, roll it out to employees and think, hey, this is great, right? Instead, include the employees who are going to be doing whatever it is and help and have them design that new, whatever the new is. So I'll give you an example to make it more concrete. So we worked with a healthcare provider, and they had, in IT, they had a really, bad rap in terms of the level of services that they provided internally. So we did some kind of analysis, kind of gather some data to find out kind of what are the problems, what are the things that are working. And then out of that, we identified 3 core areas that could be improved, one of which was communication. So rather than having a bunch of consultants, figure that out, which is not typically a good use of money, because once the consultants leave, people don't believe it, it doesn't stick. So we created what we call solution-focused work groups, and these work groups were given the charge and the authority to take the data and figure out how do we improve, in this case, the way that we communicate internally. And that team, through our coaching and advising, came up with the solutions, presented them to the organization, the IT organization. And when your peers are suggesting the change, it comes across very differently.
It's not the consultant anymore.
Right. Or it's not the CIO in this case, or it's not his directors. It's those who are going to be living with the end result. And that carries a lot more weight than the consultants, right, who leave, who have a different interest.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what was the result of this one project? Or was it too soon? Was it last week? Maybe?
No, it wasn't. So there were 3 different projects, and one of, I think, probably the greatest feedback that we got is the CIO said, you just walking around, you can feel the difference because they felt heard, right? I think sometimes we make this really complicated, right? We like to be heard, we like to contribute, we like to be part of something that we think is important. And when you can start integrating those human needs in the way that you solve your business problems, it goes a lot further than just, announcing that we've got to change something and never really putting the true support behind such a claim.
No, that makes sense. And so maybe one final question to end this with is, part of your title is Workplace Trends.
Yeah.
So I would love to hear your take on that. Like, what are the current workplace trends? Maybe in particular the ones you're looking forward to or the ones you're excited about.
So the one that we're watching real closely is the influence that artificial intelligence, machine learning, how that will change the way that, not just the way that we work, but change what we work on, right? Because at some point, the analysis that employees do can be done faster, some argue more effectively than what we can do. So while some people will lose their jobs, I think what I'm seeing right now is it's fewer people losing their jobs, just people are being reallocated to work on really complicated projects that a computer can't solve, at least today. Right. So I'm really intrigued by that because what we're seeing is if we have to interact differently, unfortunately, there's a skill deficit, as we were talking earlier, that the ability to have a disagreement with a colleague or within a team and not make it this big dramatic fallout, but rather it be part of that process of, hey, we're working through how to get to the best solution. And that takes some discipline and practice. Going back to your earlier question, which is, when do we start, how do we get people to get these skills? Now, we got to start training them and putting them in the experiences to be able to apply it rather than, I went to a workshop 6 months ago and it was interesting, but I don't even know where the material is now and I don't even use it, right? We've got to...
I've got my notes somewhere.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
It's shelfware. It's on the shelf with all my other material from all the other workshops that I attended.
Yeah, exactly. And is there anything else aside from retraining people, which is very hard on its own, of course, that HR can do to prepare for this shift? You think? It's a difficult question, maybe.
Well, it's HR is unfortunately getting a lot of flack. In some cases, it's well deserved. Coming from HR, the one thing that I have seen repeatedly that gets in HR's way is this kind of protectionism. Like, well, we've got to protect what we do, and it comes across as very rigid and not very collaborative. And the other part is, things like employee engagement, how the recruiting practices, while those are all absolutely important, there's more to how the workplace is shaped than focusing on an engagement program or well-being. While those are important, it's being a partner that can understand and come alongside their internal clients and
understanding the employee.
Yeah, right. Instead of like a one-size-fits-all approach. While there are going to be programs that need to be that way, I think businesses are very complex, and the changes that are shaping the way that we do business don't require this is how we've always done it kind of mentality. And unfortunately, HR has a bad rap for just kind of sticking with what it knows. And you could probably say HR, the title itself, might be a little dated, because HR tends to.
What would you call them?
I don't know. HR, when you think about it, it's payment, it's payroll, it's benefits, employee relations. That's almost very transactional, right?
Yeah.
You could put that in finance. HR, I think, I saw something the other day that they would be responsible for working with the robots in the workplace. It seems a little kind of far out there, but if you think about how technology is changing the way that we work and the way we interact, how can HR best close the gap between where they are today and where things are going, rather than waiting for the CEO to proclaim something needs to change, or being forced by some other outside influence, but really being strategic and monitoring what's going on, and then saying, okay, well, we got to prepare the operations, we got to prepare the people for what these trends are showing. Technology changes is one of the big ones.
All right, Shawn Murphy, thank you very much for being here.
You bet. Thanks.
Thank you.